So I read HB 1557, Florida's Don't Say Gay bill.
Hi, I'm Yum, and I'm wearing some nice clothes in this fake library den so I look professional. But the reality is when you spend all your money getting an education, philosophy, logic, poli-sci, or any social science, you're broke, and you can't afford a sports coat, and you have to use a green screen. Like I said, I read Florida's new bill, HB 1557, signed into law by Governor Ron DeSantis on March 28th, dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill, and given mass coverage as silencing any education on LGBTQ matters for young school children. And you may very well be full of doubt when you hear mainstream liberal news outlets use rhetoric that leads to outrage. But the hype is real, and it really is a garbage piece of legislation. Not only is it very clear that it does not aim solely to prohibit sexually explicit or inappropriate information to be included in instruction, but any classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3. That means school children anywhere from ages 5 to 9 will not be allowed to learn anything about same-sex relationships, even in an informal sense at school. Many kids will have begun to form romantic interests in other kids, and LGBTQ children could be bullied for their orientation or identity with no allowed advocacy from their teachers to educate the bullies about same-sex relationships are normal and should be accepted. This technically also means that heteronormative orientations are also prohibited to be discussed in the classroom. But heterosexuality is often the default understanding of relationships through family or mass media, which effectively creates a situation where ignorance of the LGBTQ community and acceptance of heteronormative standards are harbored. Essentially, it's just as much the Don't Say Straight bill as it is the Don't Say Gay bill, except gay kids need advocacy towards acceptance for their development, and straight kids already have that acceptance. The bill is also terrible for the already atrocious budgeting for Florida public education. I would know, I went through it. If a parent has a complaint and their exact demands are not met by the school district regarding these kinds of discussions, the district will have a procedure to document the agreements or disagreements. And if not settled within 30 days, the parent can file suit for injunctive relief. The Commissioner of Education in Florida will then select a judge for the case, and the school district will then be responsible for the compensation of said judge. This all comes from the district's budget. And if the judge grants relief, the school may be responsible for paying damages and all legal fees to the parent. This is an extremely expensive process, one that will directly harm the already skimmed school funding and overall Florida public education. The rest of the bill is mainly filler that establishes legal responsibilities for things that already exist in the Florida Code of Education, like disclosing all medical services provided to a student by a school to the parents. Now, there's a couple things I find really important to mention when thinking about what this bill does. The first thing I have to mention is a specific paragraph that institutes the Don't Say Gay aspect of the bill. One of the most immediate surface level defenses of the bill is to treat this wording like pedestrian or casual use of language, and not treat it like the grammatically correct legislative legal language it is. Most specifically the word or. Some may try to paint an argument that the bill is actually just preventing children from hearing about sexual intercourse, gender reassignment surgery, and other things that they would deem inappropriate for kindergartners or children to hear. Even though I have a little thought experiment for you there, if you think that teaching kids about gender reassignment would be inappropriate to them, what would you do if your 6-year-old asked you about a person in mid-transition that they saw walking around and they were confused? They want to know what was going on there. Do you just pretend like trans people don't exist or that person's a freak? What lengths do you go to in order to not teach your kids about what trans people are or what gender reassignment surgery is? All you're doing is conditioning that child to develop transphobic views because they're going to be less capable of understanding in the future because they had a pre-existing notion of what it is. And while the bill does explicitly prohibit explicit sexual concepts from being discussed, the use of the word or creates two clear independent clauses in terms of the interpretation of the law when it inevitably is enforced. So the Don't Say Gay moniker is warranted, instead of the Don't Say Anal Penetration bill. The other aspect I find important in terms of understanding the realistic implications of this bill is understanding how children think. In reality, not this perfect world in which helicopter parents want to shelter their children. Unfortunately, for parents, there's things that you can't control in terms of what your children consume or grow to understand, especially while they're at school. That kind of control is what statistically has led to higher teenage pregnancies when you try to limit sexual education and increase teen drug use when all you do is focus on abstinence. The reality is there's going to be LGBTQ kids, there's going to be parents who accept them, and they're going to be encouraging their children to be open at school. The best thing we can do to ensure that we treat each other as equals is to start from a young age. So you don't need to teach children about gay sex or genitalia in order to ensure that they respect people of all sexual orientations and gender identities. It's pretty simple, the same way that you teach children not to judge a book by the cover, just like you teach children to be patient and understanding of others. So with this understanding of the bill, I have very little to offer in terms of summarizing it, other than it stands in direct opposition to the progression of civil rights, freedom of speech. It makes an already underfunded public institution responsible for maintaining that opposition under threat of deranged conservatives tearing their budgets apart. Thank you for watching. I hope you got as much out of this description of the bill as I did reading it, because not everyone has the time or the brain disease that I have to do it themselves. Whatever you do, value yourself.